Good morning, everyone. Let's go get started.
We'll wait to go live.
Yeah, let's go live and I'll just.
You don't really care. Oh, no, that's for you guys. You don't mind sending me an email, just so you took it. Sure. But you, yeah. Well, maybe take Jeremy as the highlight.
We're live. Should we do a drum roll, everyone? Really quickly, bring in the almost there. Good morning. Good morning. We are live.
We are doing this next month.
We don't have it.
Probably won't be there next month. This is the first.
So that's why I wanted to bring in the name this morning. Good morning. Urban Renewal Agency, West Salem Redevelopment Board, December 4, 2024. Welcome all. I would like to just pass it on to Troy for a call to
Roll call. Samantha.
present.
Jeremy. Hi.
Here.
Karen's here. John Hanna. Yep. Thomas Cruz. Zachary Fisher. Here. Doug, that's it. Here. Ashley Miller. Greg Sharn. Yep.
Thank you. We get an approval of the agenda. Motion to approve agenda. Second. Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And then approval of motion to approve the November 6th. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Do not have any public comment. Nothing in writing. And then we're going to move on to our action items for
So no action items yet, but we have discussion items. So now we're getting into nice. It's interesting because we're on a fiscal year that's basically July to July. So we'll be entering calendar year 25. It will be fiscal year 26. So it's a little confusing. So in your packet, there was a memo that speaks to basically some projects that have been completed, policies, initiatives that have moved those budget items forward. And so it goes through that and then it gets into the projects that we're funding. The majority of these are carryovers. So for those of you that got the packet, you'll see that numbers are a little bit different. So because we're in the middle of fiscal year, numbers are in flux. So I based the memo numbers on what I anticipated, and so now that we're talking more closely with finance, those have shifted a little bit. So like the main one is like a redevelopment. What happened there was it listed the finance piece as 1.5 million. So we had that. We anticipate with the redevelopments happening on 2nd Street, bigger projects. So 1.5 would be enough to satisfy bigger projects. But what happened was that under the same project number, our 1 million dedicated to this path. So we have a Union Street path connection in it. Basically connect the historic railroad bridge to the Edgewater Parkway. And that was combined with the grant. So realistically, we have around 900,000 still remaining for the path piece. And then we have that 600,000 for grant. So in this, you'll see the grant was higher. So we're looking for, like, wait a minute, now you're asking for allocation of 400,000 to get the number where we need it in anticipation of projects, and that's the reason for that. Other than that, everything else is mostly carryover. So like the path improvement project, a small project fund, and we have used some of that with the art piece that is going out through the Salem Arts Commission. Have like information on solicitation or where that is, but we have this group made a recommendation to allocate funds. Actually, we already have budget for it, so we have approval to have those funds available for So we anticipate probably more need for the small project fund, so there's an allocation. So presentation, I just wanted to get that out there first, so you know, have it to look at both. It's a little different than what I got. We can tell, so that's just. Huh?
So we'll be able to see the next meeting, like an actual budget item line.
Yeah, so we'll get more into the finance piece. Yeah, so this is just early discussion, so but this is an opportunity for you to look at what we're talking about, what we're suggesting and what we had before. If there's something that you want to address, and want to bring to the group, this would be a good time to do that. What we need to do is, so if you have something like that, that we're supportive of it, I'll include it in the list, and then we'll bring the finance people in February and see, you know, how the allocation will work. It'll get more flushed out and then have action on that matter. So renewal. Know that. So here's the, I like to recap just for the group. As far as the renewal is concerned, it's there's a lot of discussion around general fund. The renewal is basically property tax growth that's retained for certain improvements in this district. So it's in a way the general fund they're not getting passed through, so that all the tax jurisdictions, school district, things like that. At the creation of this district in 2001, it retains those funds. So any property tax growth, they'll pass through everything up to 2001, so they still get funding from the property taxes here. But the new increment growth since 2001, that's retained. So it's a bit separated from the general fund discussion. I know we just had Keith Staley here from he's the city manager last week talking about budget issues. So I know in the back of everyone's mind it's his budget thing, but at the same time it's a bit insulated because this is established by state law. It's intended for very specific purposes. You can't move it around. So you're dealing with something that's a little bit different. It's very focused on blighted areas, improvements that need to happen in this specific part of the city of Salem. So just as a reminder, everything we do has to be in this district is tied to fixed capital, like permanent improvements, not something can add applications in other areas where someone wanted for their industrial business, like a mobile shredder for recycling, but it has wheels, you can literally drive it out of the district. Those are things that we don't support because it has to be hardwired, still attached to the foundation of the building. Something's significant that remains in the area. So.
Can we go back to that really quickly? So I had a business owner call me and ask me about exactly what you were speaking to, the trash receptacle. So there are, as long as they're within the urban growth boundary and it doesn't have wheels and it's presented, either attached to the structure or foundation solid, is that something that they would go through the application process?
Yeah, so for grants, actually, let me just, if you don't mind, I'm going to speak to grants and I'll speak to that.
Perfect.
On the topic of things, so you see in downtown, urban will has finance fixtures, so like furniture, street furniture, like benches and garbage cans. So those are one of those things that yes, you can put them up. It's rare. Most of the time people just break into one and make a mess of them. It's rare that they throw them in the back of the truck and take them. So those are probably one of the benches are a little bit harder. In some cases, you can, I don't know how they are downtown. I have to look. You can hold it around, but the trash. So, but yeah. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the grant piece. So this is similar to what you have in your packet. It just speaks to projects that are renewal plans. So what I like to do is once you see the renewal district and understand tax increment funds are intended for what projects in the plan, and that's what this is. So on the left column, and it's the same in the packet. The left column has the renewal plan projects, so public improvements, park improvements, streets and sidewalks, pedestrian, parking facilities, etc., property acquisition. And then the current projects reflect some of those things tied to projects in the plan. So like First and Second Street, so like First Street, we don't plan to build, that's going to be tied to development, but we use our renewal to do vacation. Second Street, we did completely, so that's done. So that you'll see that whole public improvement street and sidewalks. Then we have, as far as parking improvements and pedestrian connectivity, that's the Union Street connection. It's basically connecting across Musgrave to Union Street, Railroad Bridge, and connecting to the Edgewater Parkway. And then redevelopment grants tied to improved buildings, grants, financing incentives to any questions on land projects or current projects? So, I mean, the big thing is having Second Street complete. That was something that we financed for design and construction for several years. Now it's yeah, it took a long time. It was expensive.
2015.
Yeah. Yes. So the next one is the grants. So we have a redevelopment grant. It's similar to what we have in downtown, and there's a grant, a matching grant in North Gateway as well. The way that works is it's a $300,000 maximum grant. It's a 20% match. So it's dollars, you're going to get the maximum. So it's intended to be an incentive. It's one of these where project's going to happen regardless of the development will happen. What this does is just provides an incentive for something to happen sooner. And that's what we've seen with investments with Salem machines. So you can use it for manufacturing too. So we have had True Brothers at the time. They were one of the recipients of a grant for the expanding production lines. With Salem machinery. So this gets back to the topic of cement. So if it's a business, focus of this is to be like a manufacturing business, because then you're usually high-tech equipment or manufacturing equipment is going to be large, fixed, added jobs, added investment, because it's also, the way I like to think of it is taxable improvement. You have significant equipment investments in manufacturing. It does have that other economic ripple effects added to the district, but it also has a property tax piece, so it is taxable. Appreciates over time, but as soon as you get, I mean, most of the time, like in the case of this guy which used to be there, let's say machinery, I mean, talking, dollars in equipment, so it's a pretty significant investment that does affect the taxes. So that's what one of the small applicants is Coffee Roaster. That's pretty popular in the same area. They're a new applicant. So there's a little small, but still everything they're proposing is manufacturing equipment that's built in. They're expanding for Salem. They do their work in West Salem. Provide coffee roasting needs like community and elsewhere in the state. So if they have something like that, by all means send them to me. They'd be eligible for that type of grant. And then the other ones are for development. So that's why we see like with Frank Sweet was one of the presentations we had. Well, I updated the group on last month, both the Frank Sweet property and some of the budget properties, they would be eligible. They get to a point where they're, the trigger is new property tax investments. So with the building, it's a little bit different than downtown because you might have a historic building that's not going down. They're working the internal floors. In West Salem, for the most part, single story buildings. So in that case, if you want to expand horizontally, that would trigger where you could be eligible for the grant. Or if you're, in the case of Blush, so they have these single story buildings, but that's as big as vertical in some cases. Once they get to that building condition piece, then so there's a lot of activity. We've seen other types of projects on the east side of West Salem. So if they get to a point of moving forward, they'd be eligible to, we have probably 3 or 4 that could go. It's just a matter of time. So it's like, I've been waiting for them to apply, but I haven't seen anything. So I'm hoping as we approach summer and going into next year, some bigger projects.
Speak to that, or is it confidential?
No, it's just like I said in the last meeting, the Clutch Brainsby, I don't know if they'll get to that point yet because they're still, they have several ideas they're promoting their real estate broker going out there if they get traction. Someone actually wants to buy it. So I think there would be like the transactions that have to acquire the property, finish design. I think that probably 2 to 3 years out, most likely. For some, could be happy, it could have faster than things like that. Project specific, and maybe it's done in phases. So maybe there's easier pieces of the property that we go sooner. But it seems like they still have to go through the design permitting. There's one that's already kind of gone through on the east side of West Salem. Gone through. That one's a little bit more confidential because when you do a pre-application conference, that is they're flushing out ideas to see if the new code how it would work. They had some complications with the project, so it seems like they have some things to overcome, but yeah, I think they're working on it. I think I saw it this spring of this last year when it first came through. So they're working on that, getting it through the permit and approaching the summer again. You can see some, sorry, not summer. But it's out of the summer next potentially.
So for our viewers, more to come on that.
Yeah,
That's an incentive
yeah, so-
to keep watching.
Yeah, it was neat to see where we focused the Second Street and a lot of things on the west side. It was nice to see a couple of things happening on the east
So
side.
exciting when there's movement or potential or,
Yeah.
you know.
But some of the projects that the grant has helped with, I mentioned Truett, we had the different projects, manufacturing clinics, different things that have been have resulted grant assistance. I think that was Point in Plain Creek. Any questions on grants or the grant program? These are the locations. So, like I said, a lot of the activity has been on the west side of, when I say the west side, West Salem, West Salem Wallace. So we have had some side, and hopefully we'll have more. Then also applied for an exception, and this is where having money, at least 1.2 million in for the grant, anticipation of someone coming in for potentially $750,000 grant if they meet these criteria. So like adaptive reuse, transitioning, doing a higher density, bigger building, so a higher investment. So you're spending a lot more on a project. Has been typical. Visual improvement. So you're basically transforming something. In a lot of cases, what we're seeing is conversion of old food processing locations to something of different use, and that's a big hump to overcome. So this again is an incentive to make you eligible. What happens here is at an administrative level, we say yes, you met the exception criteria to go beyond 300,000, but it's not ultimately staff who don't make that decision. See where we do a presentation, and I would say they meet their criteria for a grant, they're seeking an exception to get more money on this basis. So the exception criteria, this group recommended that, the agency adopted it, and that was one of the caveats to it, is that you have exception criteria, but you also have agency review and approval. So they make that decision to something greater than 3. That's pretty much what I have. As far as the photo, we did our tour of the path project. We walked West Salem, indicated, you got the Edgewater Parkway, it goes under the exit ramp into West Salem, on 7th Street Bridge. And it would connect over to the path that goes to the historic street bridge. So it's a long connection. So the nice thing about that is it does connect multiple investments. So the city and the renewal agency has made investments in the street railroad bridge, the path to the park and the connection. And then you have ODOT, the city, that have established an Edgewater Parkway path that runs. So you can take that. I don't know how far it goes down 22. They're getting, I lose it as I head out to Dallas. There's a path that goes over 22, so I don't know where it goes as you go west. But it's a pretty significant connection. I just never should take a bike sometime and ride it all the way, so I know where it goes from there. But as you enter the West Salem district, you see it. You see that path that comes in the district, and then you follow all the way along Edgewater. So it's a pretty significant facility. And this is like that small connection, like the bridge both goes. Plus both those pieces. So that's also. So yeah, so I think it was very, yeah. So it's not that way. Yeah, so it comes in from Dokes. I always see people from Dokes to just as you come into what we're familiar with, like the district here, but I don't know once you go west of Dokes, like how far out it goes.
Yeah, they do the improvement.
Yeah.
They bring out Dokes and
Yeah.
obviously. Suicide curve. So this is just a discussion, no action. So if you guys see something on, if you have an idea, and you can bring your ideas to the next meeting in February. We'll have a discussion now. I think something's missing. Let's say, I know we talked about signs and things. We talked about issues around signs, but that's definitely one where we still have it as a small project fund and have money. So we keep those conversations going too. That's one of the things that we have the side conversation going still. So anything else as you go out of town that comes to mind that might be something you want to address, or maybe have a question about?
I have 2 non-project questions.
Okay.
One, I noticed on the title page here for the urban renewal plans. In 09, there's an extracted map that changed the size of the district. Just on the left.
Oh, and that,
Yeah. Like 3/4 way down the page, just corrected map.
we'll look to see exactly what that.
I was just curious, and then also what triggered the change in the district size. And then the other piece I was curious about was the amendment that came on 2011, is that a recommendation from the board, and then that has to be approved by the city council to add an amendment to this document. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so I'd have to look at that specific ordinance, but yeah, there were a change. So let's speak. So there have been urban renewal area boundaries have changed. And so another thing, for example, there's a maximum indebtedness. So the maximum amount of
financial like use you could have within a district. And then it's, all these are intended to address blight issues and then go away. So you're supposed to finish what the problem, like correct the problems, and then close down the district. And then, so all those investments, the changes that have happened since 2001 in this case, will return all to the taxing district. So go back to the school district, back to the same proper retained for the district. There is one of the considerations, we won't approach deadness until like 2027. There is a discussion already happening to say like that would be one of those two. So we do look at increasing maximum deadness. So the state law allows for a one-time adjustment for inflation. So when you create this plan, you have projects with plan and anticipated costs for that. So you try to gauge it, but you're looking at decades.
Right.
So in that case, you could have projects that you're not addressing as intended because the cost burden is so high. And so what this allows is for that adjustment without triggering basically like a substantial, like basically creating a whole. So it's just a way, so that's like for an example. If there were opportunities, if we were to look at like, so state law allows you to change your boundary 1% without triggering a substantial. If you were to go beyond that, substantial is basically it's creating a whole, you have to get all the taxing jurisdictions to, they have to do their public meetings, discuss it. It's a whole public process to do.
1% of the acquisition for you.
So the size.
Oh, just the size, like a boundary change. So like
Gotcha.
the district area, if you were, what the total area is, you can do 1% of that area change without triggering substantial. So we have done our renewable boundary changes in other districts. I think what this was a correction. It said privately was written. So I don't know the boundary change, but I have to look back in the minutes to see what that will be. Yes, it would come to this group first as a recommendation. If there were a change to the indebtedness or if there were a change to the boundary, it would be something that came here. Take your position for it or against it, and then go to the agency, and they weigh staff considerations on the sort. That's report. That's good. I'd have to look at those specific ordinances.
And there's just one that changed to added basically specific to the vicinity of Edgewater, Second Street, Curzon. It's like artwork or something. All it kind of further,
Decorative wall, did you just say that?
baller, yeah, like kind of and further enhances the bullet points of the 705. It's like they added just more description. They added more specificity to it. Essentially.
That's typically so.
That's
When these renewal areas are created, legal, and I think the community, they want to identify specific because there's a fear that you're capturing these funds, and if it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
The public's not knowing what's being used for.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So in that case, when you're very specific, which the plans are, clearly it wasn't specific enough to capture some of the fixtures that streetscape improvements. For the most part, people streetscape sidewalk or street. Right? But if you're looking for enhancements like what we did in Second Street with ballers, that's necessary. You want to make sure.
Let's call that public art too. Like this new one has, like, I don't know if there's a mention of art.
Did everyone look at page 7? Well, I guess it's section, so it's after this page. So it says page 17 on the bottom, 705. Streetscape project, thanks for bringing that up. It talks about all the different potential improvements. So speaking to, I think that Tori just asked, do we have any suggestions on what West just saying, and I would have to say yes. Talking about the streetscape, so I'm driving along the road. It's between Dutch Brothers and then I think Baxter parking lot. There's some, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? And then you can turn, yeah, it's one, that's right there, but I think that could really use some sort of, an enhancement. I don't wanna say beautification, but streetscape project potentially. Sidewalk repair program, gateway. County utilities, billboard phase, this is condition to street construction, Second Street construction, enhancement improvements along Wallace Road. So like a permanent, some sort of a fencing that would make that area like nicer looking, that kind of, because that kind of, that area moves into the Second Street, it's nice, and I feel like there's a lot of wrought iron, selected wrought iron. So I'm just looking outside of the box here,
Yeah.
because there's funds for this.
Is this area you're talking about, Bassett?
Thank you, yes. Like I
Yeah, so that's for those here.
Yeah.
Sure, Baxter.
You guys know what I'm talking about,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that, I think they're, and that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
To the visual. Actually coming in.
So we improved Second Street anticipating these things, so if we hadn't done Second Street, a property like Green Suite or Clutch Properties, they would have had to do Second Street, so that was that burden. So it's enough to address like the old industrial building for something else. They would have addressed the streets too. In this case, Bassett is one of those that the Green Suite property will have to address. So with development, that will be situated.
Okay.
So
Like
that's
it comes
where,
with it.
like in the case of Rain Suite, they would come in and say, "I have a big project coming in, I want to apply for $750,000 of grant, we meet the criteria, we go to the agency." So maybe we're not doing Bassett necessarily, but we are helping offset their overall construction costs so that they can address the Bassett needs. So either way, Bassett will be addressed, it'll be tied to the development. Is there?
1 to 3 years, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, when they develop.
3 to 7.
When they develop.
Yeah, it's more like it.
It'll take a long time, I think, too. And it seemed the way that they're broken up, that it could be developed in phases, so maybe you could have, I think the easiest one would be that commercial retail's off Bassett and Wallace. So you could do a smaller project there, and once you have some of those finances coming in, start to take off from their phases of the development. There are other streets on the east side too, where it's one of those where we did a big lift with Second Street. Me personally, it's hard for me to say, like, what's the next street project? So that's where the grant is helpful, because we can apply grant funds, because property acquisition is another thing. I mean, there was discussion internally, Rainswood wasn't, like, we think we should look at getting involved, because it just sat there in the same condition for decades, so it happened. Maybe we could, but it's, at the time we were committing to Second Street, we were hoping that it had something, investment that we did. So we'll see where that takes it, but there are other smaller properties in parts of the district. But it's just a bigger, so we're doing some of that downtown now, block 50, block 35. Just the process is just, I mean, it's nice to help it move along, but it's just longer. So if you know something's happening, you can apply grants to it. They already have the expertise, it's already in the private side. It's just all the same, just say, hopefully keep nudging, so it happens.
Sure. Dutch Brothers, Bassett.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're really talking about is the other house where you can go get the entrance. Just throwing it out there, right? But it's still a big number.
Yeah, so it'd usually be, because it's usually a frontage. So if you're taking on like this property to justify that you have like, maybe they've already contributed, I don't know, this has a reimbursement district, what it is. So if you have like this different improvement, usually, the development comes in like their share. It's just retain until you can do that. Most part, like doing like a section of the street, like just don't retain the money and then build the project. So, yeah, I think with Second Street done, yeah, they should have all this facet, you could have like that first phase. Actually, it's broken up. It's been discussed.
I know it's been discussed before about doing a write-in, write-out where you go into versus Oregon State credit union. I've seen, current intersections. I guess my thought is kind of, you're going southbound where there's that curve going into Walgreens.
Yeah.
That directs the write-in, write-out. Is that something that we could qualify? Because I know that's been an issue, and I how can we get that proposed?
So right in, right out for the Oregon State credit area?
Yeah, where you turn in to go to Les Schwab and all,
Yeah.
talk about all those.
Yeah,
There's
like
a lot of
through
times.
that weird, that through street through here. Yeah, it's like
You're trying to redirect it to the light.
Yeah. No, that whole, honestly, I mean, this whole area can be dedicated to improving streets that we walked. This east side is like a mix of like those weird drive aisles.
Yeah.
Mix of private, and public, streets that aren't to standard. So you could spend, trying to enhance this whole eastern side. Yeah. Lot. But if we would look at that, see if we could make that a little bit. I'd have to look, there's a history there, I think that was created of the development where they must have had, it's called, the public works has street standards. And you can get a variance from those street standards. So like in this case, where it connects those two pieces, and you go through from Taggart basically to the street here. This little drive area here that's pretty heavily used.
Right, which is like that access to the products, right?
Yeah.
Huge. Yes.
And then another question, I know we've talked about the Union Street Bridge path and where it goes to Second Street, and there's been people who want to have pedestrian. Has anybody looked into like pedestrian overpass, like some kind of vision, something like Willamette has over 12th Street?
Yeah, I think the hope is that by having the improvement, so where our connection is it go from, it would connect from here and go over. This is what we're working on. So we're preparing, we have an architect engaged doing it. We have the path design, but to help visualize for negotiation purposes, we're getting like a little rendering done. And once that's done, I can bring it to the group so you can see it. But we're basically preparing materials. It's these two properties where this path will go to private property. So we have one party that's willing, and the other one it's like, I want to know more. I think basically. So we're hoping that by showing them what we plan to do, we of course buy the easement, pay for the piece of property we use. We're hoping we'll get on board.
So just so I understand.
Yeah.
You're looking to connect Union Street,
Yeah, it's right here.
okay, to Musgrave, and that is for
So it connects to
bike
here.
traffic, pedestrian traffic over Mary Street Bridge.
Yeah, it goes underneath. So it would connect.
Okay.
So then you could, the preference is, there's a lot of safe connections. As Wallace,
There's no place
down
else.
here, there are a lot of resources and you keep pedestrians on this side rather than crossing where the turn lanes are. That's the concern with Second Street.
I
So
see.
you brought up a good point. We've looked at, we could still discuss that overcrossing. We found that they're not very used. I mean, I think probably the most used one is the River 2, that goes to Willamette. Even now, most people are thinking right crossing that service. But there are people who use it. But we do have other overpasses that are just neglected. I think that's the pier when we've had this conversation, it's kind of like a visual. And if you have it as ADA, you really have to really go far into both sides. So you can have to go there, you'd have to have an elevator, which parking structure and the elevators I mean, it's just, with urban renewal, you build a lot of stuff, you can't use urban renewal for maintenance, so it then becomes similar to, like, everyone likes parks in their neighborhood and elsewhere, but I guess to the point where you only have so much staff that can go out there and weed and maintain those parks, and it'll be the same thing here. So you could build a structure, you probably have to have elevators to get ADA over, if you didn't have that route, and station. So, but that's something, we're hoping by addressing this connection with Musgrave to Edgewater, we'll address that bike ped piece. And it should be, I mean, we allocated $1 million for design and construction and negotiating the property. We're hoping it comes in less, of course. So, maybe if we do that and we aren't seeing the activity that we hope for, it's still a resource. Maybe it would help address that ADA piece. We wouldn't have to have, we're going to do an overcrossing. You wouldn't do the elevator, because it could take the route. And then we could address overcrossing, well, that's still something that the community in this group would advocate for. So I guess to answer your question, it's a yes and a no. So right now we're looking at this path, but that's something that's still desired to have something going over, do more research and like a preliminary design and get cost estimates and see if it's something. Yeah, as far as this location too, it's a matter of if we were to have overcrossing here. It's just identifying, I think we have some public property tied to the industry road bridge on the east side. You'd be acquiring something, from, well, Goodwill.
Yeah.
Or let's say, or Rain Sweet, somewhere where you can land on the opposite side to have crossing piece.
I guess the way I was envisioning it would probably be the Rain Sweet site, this is an estimate.
Yeah.
Approved. Honestly, I have this much.
So how would we get that, to the non-street street, the non-name street, where Orchid Street?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that, how would we
So
get that?
coming back to these kind of improvements. Yeah. So what we'd have to do is, I'm thinking this might be, as it connects with apartments, it might be a mix of like private and public. It's clearly what uses it, so. I think it would be engaging of works to see what would involve, get to some kind of standard. I mean, there are a lot of things, intersections that don't line up. I mean, there are a lot of things that you could enhance and look better. I mean, over here, if you were to line up the drive connections, you did better building cars, so it would be a little bit complicated, but to further enhance this, make it a little safer, yeah, I'm happy to see if Public Works has ideas, and if there's an approach we can take to make that better.
We get to name the street.
Lazy. Yeah, it's weird, because you make the job, when you drive it, because I've driven it, I think because I go from Leshwa and I just go straight through the parking and I eventually connect to the tire. I get it, I mean, if I'm turning, it's a lot of people will do this when you're encountering the rush hour traffic. After, if I'm walking after work, a lot of people will turn here, and you don't notice that, because then you just do a quick left, to get around the tire. I've had to go to Ross at 5 or whatever, and I'll do that approach to get to Ross. Yeah. But in that case, then I do follow that, but if I'm heading over Leshwa, I just don't even think about it, because it's just like, it's all mushed together. And it's like, my McDonald's parking lot, am I in the driveway? Look, man, like, where am I? So, yeah. I think it'd be a good idea to enhance that. Let's see. It's interesting, anytime we talk about improvements around here, everyone's concerned, like, are you gonna take my parking spaces, or what does this mean for me? everything's working fine as is, we can do anything. Yeah, happy to see what Public Works and see how that, my guess is they probably applied with their development to get a variance from Work Street Standard. So I'd have to see what that was like. So you'd have to address that approval to open it up to enhance a little bit more. What enhancements to that? All trees, lights, sidewalks.
You guys are trying to push pedestrians and bikes vertically south.
Yeah, so if you were.
Would it make sense to push vertically north?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And tie
Have
into
connections
that?
both ways.
Yeah, so because I still have it in my head that one thing I'd like to see is some sort of discouragement from doing the Second Street shortcut. Just being one of those who passes across that intersection to and from work every day, and watch individuals jaywalk that at their own risk, and there's public speed involved in that.
That's right.
That little obscure thing in McDonald's, that street, doesn't look like a street.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing for people who aren't familiar.
Is congested much hour and with pedestrians deciding whether they want to jaywalk in that section, so then you're like,
There are
so
cars
it's
and
for
people
cars.
everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, man, look at the cars, but
Yes.
also
Yes.
somebody, walk, and then the people in the apartments come out.
I just don't know how we incentivize that improvement, but
Because you were saying Musgrave to the Union Street, or the Union, is that right there? No, that's the street, right?
yeah, it's.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, where you have this connection from south to north and then north to south. That's a good idea. Because we're already addressing that, it has to have like an intersection there. I used to walk this once a week, during lunch, I walk out here. And this section, because of the lack of activity, because most people, when they come over the bridge, they drop into Malmstrom Park. So there's this section that just gets sketch. Like, yeah, there's just, it's scary. I've seen homeless type people, sitting around jogging by and stuff. I'm sitting there and I'm approaching, okay, so I'm gearing up in my mind, like, you're ready to go. What's happening?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there have been,
And is that just trees or bushes right there from behind the restaurant, like next to the restaurant?
yeah,
You
they
walk
have a
through
fence
there.
there,
I was
and
gonna say, I thought there was a fence.
there's a fence, and they are sensitive, but all these other people, and that's one of the
So
things.
it's really tattered.
Yeah, and it's to keep that same thing, that all these people, and Jeremy can speak to this, they've all had animals and theft. So that's something we try to address too, before we approach these, potential. And we do the same thing with Schwab, we connect to that piece, is show them how we want to light it up and have fencing, make it secure. Because yes, we're encouraging that public foot traffic to the Union Street Bridge. And it does, one, you have change, so it's scary. We've done things to prevent theft and other vandalism issues. That's working, so committed to them that they'll be okay and we'll do what we can to address their concerns. I think it's a good idea. Since we're already doing this piece to have some kind of intersection. And then, yeah, maybe that could trickle into the north more and move that whole section. Better and safer. That's what I did. Yeah, so as far as these trees, there is fencing, and these properties have fencing around there. But as far as the bridge itself, it's deceiving, it drops off a lot. When we did our design, we had a lot of great work to keep it, so you have a straight ADA type slope route over it's almost like it really drops off, it's like a drainage.
which have
Both
about the
sides.
same height as the metal storage building.
Yes.
It is flatter on this side, I will say, so as far as making it, yeah, it would definitely be more feasible to connect from north to south than it is right here. But yeah, I think it's
What's that
right.
building there?
This building,
Yeah.
these are
No,
storage,
the
oh,
little one. 'Cause
this is-
that's next to the light awning, right?
yeah,
My
this
house
is the
this
tin
corner.
awning, this is like a store, like a store.
Oh, it's part of theirs, property,
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
I'm up
Yeah,
there.
it's quite diverse.
Which, speaking of, Lighthouse Lending, that's project's kind of.
Yeah, it's moving along.
running,
over there.
So, yeah. Excited about that. I think
2 years
it's-
later?
Yeah. How many years? That's quick for.
He's just battled with,
For us.
the city.
Lower there.
Now, so what he's doing is we have to get an additional permit because he's breaking up, like, out. So there was some hold up with the permitting, but he finally got that going. They were out there on Thanksgiving. No, that's not- It's been a nice one. I'm all about, like, I'm a woman, so it's all about the visual, and I'm just, if we could just do a really nice, like, some sort of fence where you didn't have to see all of that. And speaking of theft, this was kind of interesting. I always think, whenever I think of theft, I think of Ace. I don't know why, just because there's a lot of it. But I was at Ross the night after Thanksgiving, and it was close to the end of the evening, and there was just a lot of activity, nefarious going on, activity and yelling, and I didn't really connect the bridge, and this really doesn't have anything to do with our board meeting, but
It's
we're
not
all,
hard to over.
it was inside.
Oh, it's inside.
Yeah, and we were talking with the meat guy, 'cause he was coming before us. And you would be shocked at how much theft, and they actually have security guards now. Cause I was thinking Safeway would get way more theft than Ross, but not so much, and I was like, well, yeah, just as Ross is right there.
That's not too
Oh, there's so much in Goodwill, it's like, you don't wanna read the. That's just for myself.
Anyway, we're just, anyways, so they have security guards there at Ross.
Well, they can't do anything, they just watch it.
bad.
That's how it works. That's like it do.
Yeah, that's a good, thank you, Zach, again, for bringing that up.
Yeah, exactly. All good ideas. And if that's your going back, you know, it's something.
Anything else, you guys, that you can think of?
My only question was, is there a way to do a sign or some sort of acknowledgement that the Wallace Marine Park and softball fields, et cetera, are back there? Just kind of obscurely enter fairly significant traffic pattern for the athletics.
So signs for the buildings themselves are like directional or something.
Yeah, I don't know where it would be, I'm not that creative, but you know, just something to enunciate.
Like softball
because-
fields, like with the
That's
arrow
right,
type
like on
thing.
Taggart.
Yeah, I mean, you enter into
Not
it,
just
it's
Wallace
kind of
Marine Park.
obscure, you know,
There's a
you're
Wallace
going,
Marine Park.
and only because it gets a lot of outside individuals that aren't as familiar with West Salem.
Yeah, they're traveling from out of town.
I don't know,
It's
it's
hard
hard
to
a map
track
to
there.
show you where things
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
commercially in West Salem, you know, how to, I don't know, like I said, I'm not the creative one. It just seems a bit understated. But you know, it's the same way. Kind of gotta present itself in a broad fashion as well as a fight place. I don't know if we want to say Salem, it's got tents filling the field, so.
So since it's been brought up and they did the cleanup effort, and Samantha's brought it up too, is being like a hard area to navigate, with the things that have been there in the past. That's been pretty clean. Looking out along, I think, I can't speak, to what's happening north along, but, the boat ramp, the park, all those, like all those areas have been a lot better. At least the last 2 times, I think last time I was out there, it's really better. It's gotten better.
It feels like it was the fall.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have code enforcement officers?
I haven't heard anything about this. I think what's been talked about is what's happening with another support staff. I haven't seen anything as far as clients. So not yet. Yeah, I think some of those other unhoused and this kind of resources are exposed. But so far I haven't seen it.
Any other discussion?
That's what I said.
West Salem Business Association, they're delivering, Christmas flowers, incentives to all of our members, so, that's by going in and touching base with them. For our general meetings, we're averaging anywhere from, I would say, 15 to 20 on a good month. So, putting some focus on doing, instead of an email blast to all of the business owners on the reminders of the general meetings, is having actually one of my staff members call and personally write just to remind. Because a lot of times those emails go in junk, so on and so forth. So continuing to ramp up on that, I was elected president again, just because there was no one else. So Heidi with me is vice president still, so trying to come up with some different ideas with the board, so on and so forth. We're actually, I just wanted to touch base on this really quickly for our, and thank you to Salem Electric, by the way, for putting up the decorations. They do a phenomenal job every year, and that's all on their personal time, so kudos to Salem Electric, sure. But we have banners that go up during spring times right after fall. We're in the process of revamping those, and we're going to be marketing West Salem business owners that if they want to include a logo on one of those banners, we're creating an area that will give them at least 3 years of 3 to 5 years, depending on how long they last, of free marketing. There's an initial cost to it, and that will help with the decorations and
You have Second Street now too, so.
that's in the
Promote
mix.
that for additional advertising.
So, yeah, so a little bit of switch up there, and then, yeah, I think that's all I have. We don't have our general meeting for December, but we do have a board meeting. So that's all I have on the Salem Business Association. Any questions on that? I would love to see you guys there. Exactly.
Sorry, what's the next lunch?
It's 4th, it'll be in January, and it's the 4th Thursday of January. That date. Sorry. So, yeah. What else do we have? Some strategy, that's all I have. Any discussion we want to talk about next week? No, do you have any, I'm just curious, have you heard anything or seen anything from? I remember we were local contractors thinking about.
Yeah, I think the emphasis has really gone into the market.
really quickly before you.
Yeah.
The next meeting topic, so we'll bring, budget things back, so January, is the first, the next meeting will be February, and something like that. So back, but also I sent to Jeremy and Samantha, there's been a study done to see, addressing budget things. Government efficiency was one of the suggestions, recommendation was to merge. So right now we have the West End Redevelopment Advisory Board, Downtown Advisory Board, and the Gateway Advisory Board, merging those into one body. So right now it's just a discussion. It was talked about in the last council meeting. So get a presentation in February to see what you guys think about it. So it'll probably be taking members of this board, or members of other boards, and then one. Don't know how that would work. If it would really move forward, it was just one of those kind of, you could do this, and the interest from council was to see what you guys thought, so it'll be a.
That's the cut of the cost. But-
Well, yeah, somewhat.
Oh, there's the pay.
Yeah, well, there is the admin side, so, you know,
Just the chair.
and it's not just, there's a lot of boards and commissions, so anywhere there was like, you know, there's a common use or overlap. And you have like staff doing one meeting instead of staff. So it's just one of those things. I think I'll cut costs and be efficient, but I don't know, I understand too, some of the discussion in council was, you know, when you get different voices from different parts of the community, because you have that public, you know, advisory body meeting specific application. I think that was a good discussion on that side. I don't know what the outcome is, I don't know what the preference is. That might work with you guys. So it's what it is. So it'll be an ongoing conversation to start with. So again, no, you guys are awesome. And it's not having volunteers, we take your time, and it's really appreciate all of that. So yeah, it's trying to make the best use of everyone's time. Still get those voices from different parts of the community. So it's just a conversation.
When will that, and that will be in
That'll be in February.
Sorry, missed the bullet points. Sorry, guys. Okay, any other discussion? Jeremy, do you have anything for the good of the group?
Yeah, nothing for the good of the order today.
Okay, all right. Anything else, you guys? Okay, we are adjourned officially.